There is a man lying face down in the grass on a hillside in South Wales. He has been there for 2 hours and 40 minutes. He has not eaten. The temperature is 11 degrees Celsius, and there is a slow rain coming in off the Brecon beacons, the kind that soaks through fabric quietly and without hurry, the kind that does not feel serious until you stop being able to feel your hands. The man's ghillie suit, a mass of jute netting, Hessian strips, and locally gathered vegetation that took him 4 days to build, has been pressed so flat against the earth that the outline of his body has essentially ceased to exist. From the ridgeline where a British Army instructor is watching, the man is not there. He is a piece of hillside. He is a patch of dead bracken and wet moorland grass. He is nothing. The Marine from Camp Pendleton, California, is not there. The corporal from the parachute regiment lying 8 meters to his left, also attempting the same exercise on the same hillside under the same gray Welsh sky, is also not there. He too is invisible. He too has vanished. But the Marine is invisible in a way that is starting to make the instructor uneasy, because there is a specific kind of invisible that happens when a man stops being patient. It is invisible in the way a coiled spring is invisible, loaded with potential energy just before it releases. The instructor knows this because he has been watching men attempt this exercise for 11 years, and after 11 years, you stop watching the ground and start watching the ground's psychology. At 2 hours and 51 minutes, the Marine moved. It was not a large movement. It was a shoulder roll, maybe 6 inches of lateral displacement, one arm redistributing its weight, because 2 hours and 51 minutes of prone immobility in 11-degree rain does something specific to the human shoulder joint that no amount of physical training can fully prevent. 6 inches, a fraction of a body length. In any other context, it was nothing. On that hillside in Wales, on the final exercise of a course that had already taken 7 weeks to reach, in front of an instructor watching from 400 meters away through a 25-power spotting scope, 6 inches was everything. The instructor picked up his radio. He spoke 2 words. He put the radio back down. He watched the walker, a non-firing assessment guide, who had been positioned roughly 30 meters from the Marine's location, walk up to the ghillie suit, crouch down, and tap the man on the shoulder. The Marine stood up. He stood in the rain on the hillside and looked back towards the observation post, where the instructor sat, and he did not move again because there was nowhere useful to move to. He had failed. He had failed not because he moved. Every man who had ever attempted that exercise had moved at some point. He had failed because he moved too early, and the distinction between those two things is the entire content of what the British Army has been trying to teach people about the nature of sniping since 1916. This is that story. The place where the British Army trains its snipers is Daring Lines, Brecon, a garrison town sitting at the southern edge of the Brecon Beacons National Park in mid-Wales. The Infantry Battle School at Brecon is a British Army training establishment at Daring Lines, and it was established there in 1939 at the start of the Second World War. In the decades since, it has become the institutional spine of British infantry training. The Infantry Battle School in Brecon, mid-Wales, delivers trained officers and soldiers to meet the operational requirements of the infantry, the Army, and defense. Almost every infantry officer and NCO who has served in the British Army in the modern era has passed through Brecon at some stage of their career. Every infantry soldier from the rank of corporal to general has at some point crossed into that hallowed land. The weather there is not incidental. Brecon is a harsh and unforgiving environment. You can experience all 4 seasons in a day. Admittedly, summer will last about 5 minutes at best, and winter will last 23 hours. This is not scenery. It is a training tool. The Brecon beacons exist to remove the comfort that people carry with them when they arrive, the assumption that physical discomfort has a foreseeable end, that cold and wet and dark are temporary conditions that will eventually resolve. They are not temporary on the beacons. They are the permanent state, and the training that takes place there is built on the understanding that a man who cannot function effectively in that environment cannot be trusted to function in worse ones. Students who pass their unit sniper selection cadre then attend the arduous Basic Sniper Course, Part 1, run by Sniper Division, Support Weapons School at the Infantry Battle School at Brecon in Wales. Candidates for the centralized sniper training attend a 9-week course delivered at the School of Infantry in Brecon with approximately 40% passing. 40%. On a course that only accepts soldiers who have already passed their unit's own pre-selection process, that have already been identified by their regiment as among the most capable men available, more than half will fail. The number is not a bureaucratic statistic, it is a description of what the course actually demands. But to understand why the British course is what it is, why it demands what it demands in the specific way it demands it, you have to go back to a hillside in South Africa in 1900 and a Scottish lord who was furious. The British Army that arrived in South Africa to fight the Boers in 1899 was the most professional standing army in the world. It was also in the specific context of what it found waiting for it on the South African veld, spectacularly unsuited to the fight. The Boers were not a conventional army. They were farmers and hunters who had spent their entire lives in terrain that broke European soldiers the way heat breaks iron. They could shoot at distances that British officers could barely credit. They could move across open ground without being seen, occupy positions that appeared to offer no cover, and then disappear before a counterattack could be organized. The British had rifles and regiments and logistics and a century of imperial confidence. The Boers had fieldcraft. For the first year of that war, fieldcraft was winning. During the early stages of the Second Boer War in 1899, the British Army was initially struggling to gain accurate information about Boer tactics, whose fieldcraft made them an elusive opponent. After 3 disasters of Black Week in December 1899, Lord Lovat was allowed to raise a new regiment from Highland stalkers, shepherds, gamekeepers, and gillies whose skills could match those of the Boers. Simon Joseph Fraser, the 14th Lord Lovat, was a Highland landowner who understood something that the conventional British officer class did not yet grasp. The original Lovat Scouts were formed from a cadre of skilled woodsmen, and the first recorded use of the ghillie suit in combat was by the Lovat Scouts during the Second Boer War. This Scottish Highland regiment was mustered by Simon Fraser, the 14th Lord Lovat. The first batch of troops for this unit was drawn from gamekeepers, professional stalkers, and similar men of the earth who toiled on Scottish estates. These men did not need to be trained how to observe. They had been doing it all their lives. A Highland gamekeeper in 1900 spent his working days tracking deer across open moorland, reading ground sign at distances where even experienced soldiers would see nothing, reading wind direction from the movement of grass stems, understanding the difference between a shadow and a shape, between an absence of movement and the controlled stillness of something that did not want to be seen. They brought with them a piece of equipment they had developed on the shooting estates of northern Scotland. A garment built from strips of burlap and local vegetation, designed to dissolve the human outline against the ground. Derived from the Scottish Gaelic word gille, meaning lad or servant, a gillie was a man or boy who served as a game attendant and specialized in fishing, stalking, and hunting. The Lovat Scouts were the first known military unit to wear a ghillie suit. Leaving for South Africa in March 1900, the Lovat Scouts' tactics immediately transformed British intelligence gathering. Pioneering the ghillie suit, traveling on ponies, using spyglasses, and communicating with heliographs and semaphores, the regiment justified Lord Lovat's faith in bringing Highland skills to the battlefield. Another item of distinction for the Lovat Scouts was their skill in observation. Using nothing but a 20-power spotting scope, it was accepted that a Lovat Scout could observe troop movement in great detail at a distance of 10 miles and report on activity at distances up to 15 miles. These were not superhuman abilities. They were the product of specific practice in specific conditions over a long period of time. But they introduced into the British Army's institutional memory an idea that the Highland estates had been practicing for centuries, that the most dangerous thing alive in open country is a patient man who knows how to disappear. That idea had to be rediscovered 16 years later, and its rediscovery came at enormous human cost. In the autumn of 1914, when the Western Front crystallized into the trench system that would define the next 4 years of the war, the British Army found itself outmatched by German snipers in a way that soldiers and officers found both terrifying and inexplicable. The German Army had entered the war with a trained sniper cadre. Many German snipers were pre-war competition shooters and hunters, equipped with commercial sporting rifles fitted with telescopic sights at a time when the British Army was still issuing iron-sighted Lee Enfields to everyone, including the men assigned to the most precise shooting tasks. After the war, Major Hesketh Pritchard broke down scouting and sniper involvement in the trenches into phases. From 1914 to 1915, German snipers controlled the trenches, representing a clear German advantage. From 1915 to 1916, British sniping got organized, and advantage became even. The man who broke that German dominance was Major Hesketh Vernon Hesketh Pritchard, DSO, MC, who commanded the 1st Sniper Observation and Scouting School for the British Army during World War I. Hesketh Pritchard's background prior to the war was mainly as a big-game hunter, and he was regarded by some as the world's best rifle shot. Hesketh Pritchard was one of those particular products of Edwardian Britain that the country's class system occasionally threw up with accidental utility. A man whose leisure pursuits had made him genuinely dangerous. He had hunted grizzly bear in British Columbia, puma in Patagonia, moose in Labrador, and, critically, red deer on the Scottish Highlands. He understood ranges and wind and light and cover with the precision of a man who had spent his adult life depending on that understanding. When he arrived at the Western Front and started asking the questions nobody was asking, specifically why so many British soldiers were being killed by rifle fire from positions that appeared to offer no angle of observation, he rapidly concluded what a Highland gamekeeper could have told the whole army in 1914. The Germans were using their ground better. Hesketh Pritchard set up the first centralized British sniper training program in 1915, drawing on the Lovat Scouts and on civilian hunters and target shooters recruited from across the empire. He taught his students not how to shoot, most of them could already shoot, but how to see, how to use a loophole in a parapet, how to read light angles, how to identify a position by its shadow rather than its shape, how to build a hide that used local materials, local colors, local textures, how to remain still until stillness became a kind of invisibility. The Germans, who had dominated the sniper war in 1914, found themselves outmatched by 1917. The Americans selected as snipers attended British sniper schools. However, the war ended before their employment could have a decisive effect. That institutional knowledge, the specific combination of observation skill, fieldcraft, patience as a disciplined technique rather than a personal trait, entered the British Army's training culture and remained there. It evolved. It was refined by 2 world wars, by the Malayan Emergency, by Borneo, by Northern Ireland, by the Falklands. By the time the sniper wing at the Infantry Battle School in Brecon was formalized into the structure it holds today, it was carrying a century of accumulated institutional thinking about what actually makes a man invisible. The answer that century had produced was not the ghillie suit, not the rifle, not the optics. It was time, the willingness to wait longer than the thing you were watching expected to be watched. The British Sniper course at Brecon is built in 2 parts. Part 1 covers the L-115 A3 sniper rifle and associated equipment. Part 2 covers fieldcraft and battle exercises. The separation is deliberate and philosophically important. You learn to shoot first, then you learn when. not to be seen while you do it. The marksmanship phase teaches the weapon, teaches wind reading, teaches range estimation, teaches the mechanics of delivering a first-round hit on a target at ranges that would have seemed fanciful to a Victorian infantryman. The primary weapon of the British military sniper is the L115, A3 long-range rifle, a bolt-action weapon chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum, with an effective range out to 1.2 kilometers, employing a Schmidt and Bender 5 to 25 times 56 pm 225 power magnification day scope. According to British guidelines, when equipped with the 5 to 25 times 56 Schmidt and Bender scope, it gives a competent sniper the ability to achieve a precision shot at up to 400 meters, achieve a first-round hit on a man-sized target at 900 meters, and provide harassing fire out to 1,500 meters. The L115A3 is the weapon that in November 2009 was used to set the longest confirmed sniper kill in recorded history. A British Army sniper utilizing an L115 recorded the longest sniper kill in history during November of 2009 when he successfully engaged and defeated a pair of Taliban machine gunners at a range of 2,707 yards. The rifle used was of the L115A3 model variety. That record did not come from technology alone. It came from the fieldcraft tradition that made the shot possible in the first place. At 2,707 yards, a man who has not been trained to be completely invisible before he fires does not get a first shot. He gets compromised on approach, or gets seen occupying his position, or gets killed before he settles into the optic. The shot and the concealment are inseparable. They always have been. The fieldcraft phase is where most men fail the British course. Snipers must be proficient in the art of camouflage and concealment. To aid in achieving this, snipers may wear a ghillie suit and other forms of covering. These ghillie suits are made from camouflaged materials that the sniper adapts so they can blend in with their surroundings and natural environment. While sniper training courses teach snipers how to make and use full-body ghillie suits, it is common practice for snipers to wear smaller coverings such as ghillie capes, hats, and shrouds. The suit is not issued. You build it yourself from materials that match the specific environment you will be assessed in. The building of the suit is itself the first test, because a man who does not understand why each strip of hessian is positioned where it is, who has assembled camouflage rather than designed concealment, will be visible to a trained eye in the first 2 minutes of the stalking exercise, regardless of how impressive his suit looks on the ground in the equipment shed. The stalking exercise is the final assessment of the fieldcraft phase, and it is the element that ends the most careers on the British sniper course. The premise is simple. During the sniper stalk, the potential snipers are deployed a kilometer away from an observation post, which they are required to approach without being spotted. Once in a position to observe the OP without being seen themselves, they would reveal the letter held up by the instructor to ensure they could see the position. 1 kilometer. In any other context, that is a short distance. A reasonably fit person walks a kilometer in 12 minutes on flat ground. On this exercise, candidates cover that kilometer in 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours, depending on the ground and the light and the wind and the position of the sun and what the vegetation is doing and where the instructor's spotting scope is likely to be angled at any given moment. They move in what is sometimes called the leopard crawl, sometimes the ghost crawl, a technique of forward movement that keeps every centimeter of the body as close to the ground as the terrain allows, that moves in increments measured in inches rather than meters, that stops entirely when the wind drops because a stationary ghillie suit in still air looks like ground, and a moving one does not. A corporal working as an instructor on the course explained the assessment criteria. What we're looking for today is potential snipers using the correct use of ground. That is the biggest thing during the stalk. If they don't do a proper intelligent preparation of the battlefield map recce, they will walk out in front of the observation post potentially. Also things like sudden movement, insufficient camouflage. Again, if they're in some gorse bushes and they have elephant grass in their ghillie hood, we're going to spot that straight away. The mismatched vegetation detail is not trivial. An instructor scanning a hillside through a high-power spotting scope is not looking for a man. He knows there is no man visible. He is looking for the thing that is not quite right, the patch of color that doesn't match its immediate surroundings, the piece of vegetation that is moving in a different direction to everything adjacent to it, because it has been attached to a suit rather than rooted in the earth. The shape that is almost exactly right but has a slight regularity to it, a slight smoothness, that living ground does not have. He is looking for the error in the camouflage, because there is always an error, and the entire exercise is a race between the candidate's patience and the instructor's eye for the error. The instructor watching from 400 meters is not scanning casually. He is using the same observation technique that Hesketh Pritchard codified in 1915 and that the Lovat Scouts brought down from the Scottish Highlands before that. He divides the ground into sectors. He works each sector methodically with the spotting scope, from near to far, from edge to center. He watches for the things that indicate a human presence, not through their presence, but through their absence. The patch of shadow that doesn't move with the sun, the gap in the vegetation that is slightly too regular, the point where the curvature of the ground produces a subtle discontinuity that the slope of the hill itself wouldn't explain. He is reading the ground the way a highland ghillie reads a deer forest, not as a visual field, but as a text, looking for the sentence that doesn't belong. And he has time. The exercise gives him time. The entire architecture of the British stalking exercise is built on the assumption that the instructor can watch longer than the candidate can stay still. That assumption is the key to everything. The United States Marine Corps Scout Sniper Program is, by any objective measure, one of the finest sniper training programs in the world. A USMC Scout Sniper was a Marine infantryman highly skilled in fieldcraft and marksmanship who could deliver long-range precision fire on high-value targets from concealed positions in support of combat operations. For decades, the path to joining the Marines' proud fraternity of Scout Snipers went through the Scout Sniper Basic Course, and the Marines ran the 13-week course at 3 schoolhouses: Camp Pendleton, California, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and Marine Corps Base Quantico, Virginia. The Basic Scout Sniper Course provides Marines and other service members with Scout Sniper training and preparation for duty as a Scout Sniper within an infantry battalion, reconnaissance unit, and Marine Special Operations Unit. The USMC course is long, demanding, and produces shooters of exceptional technical quality. Known distance range training includes shooting at the 300, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, and 1,000 yard lines with 5 rounds fired at each yard line. During this phase, Marines must become experts at the fundamentals of marksmanship and must also become experts at calling wind and weather. The USMC also trains stalking. They teach concealment and ghillie suit construction and observation technique. The program is genuinely world-class. But there is a difference, and the difference is not in what the 2 courses teach. It is in what the 2 courses assume. The American approach to sniper training, like the American approach to most military training, is built around a model of measurable progression. A candidate moves through identifiable phases, demonstrates proficiency at each phase, and advances when proficiency is demonstrated. The stalking exercise has a time limit. The candidate knows the time limit. The time limit creates a rhythm, and the rhythm creates an unconscious psychological structure. I need to cover this much ground in this much time, which means I can move at this approximate rate, which means that at a given point in the exercise, moving is acceptable. The timer becomes a permission structure. It tells you, implicitly, that movement within a certain temporal envelope is within the rules. The British exercise does not work this way. The British exercise has a time limit, but the time limit is not the operative constraint. The operative constraint is the instructor's attention and the instructor's Attention does not follow a clock, it follows the ground. The question the British candidate has to answer is not how fast he can move without being detected. It is whether he can make the instructor believe the ground is empty. Those are different questions, and they require different psychological orientations to answer them. The American question admits of a speed strategy. The British question admits of only one strategy, and that strategy is patience. A sniper needs to take his or her time. This applies to all facets of the stalk. A team needs to take their time when selecting a proper final firing position, preparing a good plan, moving and examining the position before moving into it. Moving slowly and deliberately is critical. A sniper is invisible, and that is one of the key components to a sniper's survival. One of the easiest ways a sniper gives their position away is through movement. The Marine who moved too early on the Brecon hillside was not an inferior soldier. He was a product of a training system that had given him a time limit, and 2 hours and 51 minutes into that time limit, on a cold hillside in Wales, with rain soaking through his ghillie suit and his shoulder beginning to seize up, the system he had been trained in told him a story. The story was, "You have been here nearly 3 hours. You are close enough. The exercise has been going long enough that a small adjustment is reasonable. You will not be seen by a small adjustment." The story was wrong. The instructor 400 meters away was watching a hillside that had been empty for nearly 3 hours, which meant he had been watching it for nearly 3 hours with the specific alertness that an empty hillside creates in a trained observer. An empty landscape after a long period of stillness is not a relaxed landscape. It is a landscape that is one movement away from giving itself away, and every observer who has been staring at a fixed piece of ground for 3 hours knows it. The longer the stillness holds, the higher the value of breaking it becomes. The longer the Marine had been lying still, the more visible that 6-inch shoulder roll became, because it was the first thing that had happened in nearly 3 hours, and the instructor's attention was exactly calibrated to notice it. Stalking requires close attention to detail of both the changing vegetation and light conditions through which a sniper moves. It also requires a high tolerance for discomfort. The stalking and target detection exercises are the most significant disqualifiers on the course. What the British course teaches, and what the Marine had not fully internalized, is that the discomfort is not a side effect of the exercise. It is the exercise. The rain and the cold and the shoulder and the 2 hours and 51 minutes are not inconveniences around the stalking problem. They are the stalking problem. The man who passes this exercise is the man who understands that his own physical suffering is the most dangerous thing on the hillside, not the instructor's eye. His body will try to move. It will produce urgent, immediate, biochemically compelling reasons why 6 inches of adjustment is necessary right now. And every one of those reasons is a trap. The debrief that follows a failed stalking exercise on the British sniper course is not punitive. It is clinical. The instructor who saw the movement will describe precisely what he saw, from what angle, at what point in the exercise, and why that specific movement was visible from 400 meters when the preceding 2 hours and 51 minutes of the candidate's approach had been invisible. The precision of that debrief is itself an education. It tells the candidate not that he failed, but exactly why he failed, and exactly what the failure looked like from the outside, which is knowledge he did not previously have, because the nature of good concealment is that you cannot see yourself. For the Marine who had come from Camp Pendleton to attend the British course, that debrief contained a piece of information that his own training had not fully prepared him to receive. That at the moment he moved, he was already succeeding. His approach had been excellent. His ghillie construction had been correct. His route selection had used the ground intelligently. He had been, for 2 hours and 51 minutes, genuinely invisible from 400 meters in the hands of a trained observer. He had done almost everything right. The thing he had not done was wait 9 more minutes. Over the demanding training program, trainees concentrate on advanced marksmanship, consistently aiming for pinpoint accuracy in realistic environments. At the same time, they expand their talents in camouflage, silent movement, and constructing concealed observation posts, sometimes remaining hidden and motionless for days, absorbing subtle changes in their surroundings. Days, not hours. The British training tradition does not treat the stalking exercise as the end point of the patient's curriculum. It treats it as the introduction. The soldiers who pass the Brecon course and go on to operate with sniper platoons in contact with a real enemy will be expected to occupy observation posts for periods measured in days rather than hours. In conditions that make a Welsh hillside in November rain look positively accommodating. Afghanistan, Iraq, Northern Ireland before them, the Falklands before that. In every one of those environments, the effective sniper was the man who had internalized a single operating principle so deeply that his body had adopted it as its default state. The longer you wait, the safer you are, the more you see, and the more dangerous you become. This is the inheritance of Lord Lovat's gamekeepers. When the Lovat Scouts deployed to South Africa in March 1900, they brought with them a way of thinking about open ground that the Victorian Army could not have invented because it had never had to. The Army moved in formed bodies, in visible concentrations, with flags and bands and the explicit statement that it was present and intended violence. The ghillies' way of moving through ground was its precise opposite: the denial of presence, the erasure of self from the landscape, the patient accumulation of invisibility over time until the ground itself became an ally rather than a stage. The legacy that the Lovats introduced to modern sniping with the introduction of advanced stalking skills, exceptional observation ability, and especially the ghillie suit, firmly puts them in a place of history in the tradition of military sniping. That legacy ran in a direct line through Hesketh Pritchard's 1915 sniper school, through the Second World War, through every conflict the British Army fought in the second half of the 20th century. And it arrived at the sniper wing at IBS Brecon, carrying with it the accumulated operational evidence of 120 years. Patience kills. Impatience gets you killed. Those two facts are not motivational statements. They are operational data, confirmed in every theater and every generation. And the British Sniper Course is the institutional mechanism for selecting and producing the men who have understood them at a level deeper than intellectual assent. The Marine from Camp Pendleton understood them intellectually. He had arrived at Brecon with a 13-week course behind him, with real capability and genuine commitment. He was not arrogant. He was not complacent. He moved at 2 hours and 51 minutes because his body told him to, and because his training had not yet taught him to treat his body's urgency with the specific contempt that the British course teaches. That contempt is not cruelty, it is accuracy. The body is wrong. The body does not understand long-range precision operations. The body is an impatient animal that wants to shift its weight and relieve its shoulder and get out of the rain. The mind trained on the Brecon Hills knows that the body's urgency is the enemy's best asset. The parachute regiment corporal, lying 8 meters away, did not move. He had been on the hillside for the same length of time, in the same rain, with the same cold, working into the same joints. He passed his final exercise. He passed it not because he was physically superior to the Marine, though para-selection is its own particular form of brutality. He passed it because somewhere in his training, in the years he had spent in the regiment, in the specific culture of an institution that had been refining this skill since Lord Lovat's gamekeepers first took their ghillie suits to war, he had acquired an understanding of time that the Marine had not yet reached. Time was not something to be beaten or managed or outrun. Time was the weapon. The longer you lay still, the more time accumulated in your favor. Every minute of immobility was a minute of debt the ground owed you. You collected that debt by lying there and doing nothing until the nothing became indistinguishable from the hillside itself. The instructor who called the Marines failure had seen it happen before. The Infantry Battle School also provides specialist training teams to assist foreign forces in their development and allocates some places on courses to overseas students. American, Commonwealth, Allied nation students have attended Bracon for decades. Some pass, some do not. The ones who do not pass most commonly fail in the same way, not because they lack the physical tools or the marksmanship or even the fieldcraft knowledge, but because their training has given them a different relationship with time. A relationship in which time is a resource to be managed efficiently rather than a weapon to be deployed patiently. American military culture at every level, from infantry tactics to special operations to sniper training, is built around the concept of tempo. Speed of action, compression of the decision cycle, maintaining the initiative by moving faster than the enemy can adapt. It is a genuinely powerful operational philosophy that has produced extraordinary military outcomes. But sniping, the specific version of warfare that has been associated with the British Army since the Lovat Scouts, does not run on tempo. It runs on its opposite. The British Army calls the thing it is trying to produce in its sniper course a fieldcraft mindset. It is a phrase that appears in training documents and instructor briefings and has been used in various forms since Hesketh Pritchard's era. What it means in practice is a specific reorganization of a soldier's relationship with the passage of time and physical discomfort. It means training a man to experience 2 hours of wet immobility on a cold hillside, not as an ordeal to be endured until it ends, but as a productive state to be maintained because the mission value of that immobility is accumulating with every minute. The man who is invisible for 3 hours is not simply more patient than the man who is invisible for 2 hours and 51 minutes. He is 3 hours of invisibility. He is a man that the ground has accepted. After the stalking exercise concludes, after the candidates who have been called out are standing in the rain and the ones who succeeded are still lying in it, waiting for the all clear, there is a moment that every instructor who has worked the Bracon course has observed, and none of them has entirely been able to explain. The candidates who passed do not stand up immediately. Some of them stay prone for another 30 or 40 seconds before they move, not because they have not heard the signal, because they have become so completely acclimated to immobility that standing up requires an act of conscious will rather than a simple physical choice. They have to decide to be visible again. The hillside has to let them go. That is not metaphor. It is a description of a trained psychological state that the British Army has been producing in its snipers for over a century, and it is the state that the Marine from Camp Pendleton was 9 minutes away from when his shoulder decided the matter for him. The instructor radioed the failure. He made a note in his logbook. He kept watching the hillside because there were still candidates on it. He watched with the same precise, unhurried attention he had brought to the exercise at the start. From 400 meters through a 25-power scope on a wet gray Welsh hillside in the institutional tradition of 120 years of British fieldcraft, he watched. The ground gave nothing away.